Welcome back to my author commentary for A Prince of Song and Shade. Today we're up to chapter 31. This is the chapter when Talyn returns to Mithrena. Well, she's just returned from Mithrena and she's heading up to Darmor to the Skyreach to join the royal family there. It's quite a lot to unpack in this chapter, so let's jump straight into it. Firstly, we get our first introduction to Darmor, Mareland and the Skyreach. Little side note, if I was Mithranan and had to pick where I'd want to live in Mithrena, I think it would be Darmor. I love the idea of a port city that isn't quite as crowded and nuts and chaotic as Dock City, where the weather is colder, beautiful mountains kind of looming overhead, and like I said, just less busyness and less intensity. I can totally see myself curling up in a little cabin just outside the city with a little fire and my books and writing and wandering into town for a carvey every morning. Anyway, enough about me. We also get, obviously, the Skyreach, the amazing city up on the mountains where the royal family like to live during the hot Mithranan summer. As for Talyn, she's still very much reeling from her realization that the Shadowhawk has shadow abilities. She assumes that means he's a shadow and that he's been betraying her this whole time, and Sari kind of tries to reason with her about that. I think if Talyn was thinking about this more rationally, if she wasn't wasn't responding so emotionally to the revelation, she'd probably think it through a little bit more too and realize that there's possibly more to it, that what she knows about the Shadowhawk doesn't actually fit with a trained shadow assassin. But a little bit of world building and backstory for you there on that. So Cuinn inherited his shadow magic from his ancestor Rihanna. Rihanna is one of the main protagonists in the prequel series to A Tale of Stars and Shadow, which is unpublished but is written at least in first draft form. She does have shadow magic. She trained at realisation, the Shadow Academy, but I won't say too much more on that because I don't want to spoil that story or that book. But that is the source of the magic that Cuinn has inherited from her. That's kind of passed down through the line, and that's where he gets it from. And of course, he's not been properly trained in how to use it, which is why his use of it is so blunt. And that's probably one of the things, if Talyn was thinking more rationally, that she would pick up on, as Sari very much has. So yeah, very much kind of angry and upset and annoyed and all the rest of it, because she really feels underlying all of that betrayed by him. She does, however, make the decision to trust Zamrul and ask him for help with continuing on her investigation into vengeance on the Cullinan's behalf. Another little kind of stepping stone towards their eventual kind of partnership as Cullinan partners. She does trust him. She allows herself to ask him for help, and he promises to do so they can hopefully try and further their own investigation there, figure out what vengeance is up to. But jumping ahead towards the end of the chapter, she's further frustrated in that endeavour because they're about to leave the Skyreach almost as soon as she's arrived. But she arrives in Darmor, coming back to earlier in the chapter to find Tiercelin has returned to them. So Cuinn made that deal with Azralan that he would happily go to Montan. He would do everything that was asked of him, and he'd do it with a smile on his face in return for Tiercelin being returned. Tiercelin's just as happy to be back with the wolves as the wolves are to have him back. For Talyn, it's certainly a weight off her shoulders. It feels like a piece coming back together to make them whole in a way. She immediately, or almost immediately, confides in him, as she has now with Zamrul and Cuinn, her origins, her Darmoric's blood, her connection to the royal family. Now, Tiercelin is not as sanguine about this realization as Cuinn and Zamrul were, and Halun is later on in this chapter. He is a noble like she is, unlike the others. He has a better grasp of the strategic undercurrents, the implications of her being a Darmoric, and of course, he's the one who's guessed that she is Siantar, that her family is the Siantar family, and has guessed that Triss is probably Tristan Siantar, which makes her the heir now. So all those things serve really to trouble him even more than he had been before. And he worries very much about what the implications might be for the wolves, which Talyn has also worried about. She does her best to assure him that she will never do anything to betray the wolves and that they will come first in terms of their safety, which he accepts. He trusts her like they all do. But it is interesting that he's certainly more troubled by her revelations than any of the others are. Although, interestingly, jumping forward to the conversation that she has with Halun later on in the chapter, Halun is more reassured or less worried about her revelation because he understands in a way that the others can't what the wolves mean to her. They've helped her kind of come back to herself, learn who she is, post Sari's death and start to heal. And they've very much served that same function for him after the tragic deaths of his sister, his mother, and he thinks his niece Ivani, even though Ivani still lives. So he understands how much she cares and how deep that connection is in a way that the others can't. And that's part of the reason he's more reassured, despite her revealing to him that she's a member of the Darmor's family. That is a small, very kind of touching scene between her and Halun. We get the full story of what happened to him, his slavery, how he escaped, and the very vague reference to Sania's network. That's the network that helps the slaves escape Montan. But as we learn later on in A King of Masks and Magic, there are expectations around that help, that they join them, they join the cause in terms of vengeance and trying to unseat the Mithraean nobility and restore some kind of social equality to Mithraean. And Halun was simply so heartbroken, so lost, that he had no ability to do anything beyond just survive day to day. Hence, they sent their thugs after him early on in A Tale of Stars and Shadow. It set upon him in the cell to kind of teach him a lesson and convince him to come back. Not what Theak assumed at the time. So yeah, we get that interesting bit of backstory, which is lovely. And then, of course, Talyn says to him, what do we need to do to protect you in terms of going to Montan? And he reveals that he is still a slave, he's escaped, and that he would be recaptured if he returned. So Talyn figures out a way to have him stay back in Mithraean so that he's not put in danger. And then, as she kind of refers to right at the end of the chapter, starts thinking about perhaps how Zamrul might be able to help learn more about Halun's lord and a way to perhaps free him so that he's able to travel freely. The other thing that happened in this chapter, just now going back another step, is Talyn and Cuinn reuniting. There are subtle changes to Cuinn since Talyn's departure or her absence. He's a little bit more cooperative. He's certainly been working more with the wolves than he has in the past. And for Cuinn, this is partly because it gets getting harder and harder for him to hold up the pretense around the wolves, around Talyn in particular. He just wants so badly to just be able to be himself with people that clearly care for him. And he just is losing that desire or that need or that sharp edge of desperation for protection to keep himself safe around the wolves. So she's still very much caught up in the grief around her father and the betrayal around the Shadowhawk. So she doesn't necessarily pick up on it during this scene, but you certainly see the way Cuinn is behaving towards her, and in later conversations in another chapter with Theak in terms of how he's been interacting with the wolves in her absence. So yeah, we finished this chapter. We are off to Montan. We are going to see what Montan's like, meet the House Lords, the Ahara, and have some fun times there. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. If you've got any questions or comments about it, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to chat as always. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you again for chapter 32. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.